I have been gardening for around 5 years and have been able to experiment with a variety of different soil mixes. I found that each soil mix has its own unique use case. For starting seeds, I found that one particular mix consistently produces healthy, strong seedlings. In order to make this mix, you will need peat moss, worm castings, vermiculite, and perlite. The purpose of the peat moss is that it helps with nutrient and water retention. Similarly to the peat moss, the vermiculite will improve moisture and nutrient retention, as well as improving soil aeration. Perlite will increase soil aeration and drainage. Lastly, worm castings are going to mainly provide the nutrients as well as giving the soil more structure. It is important to note that worm castings is a generic term. There is no standardization in what is and what is not considered worm castings. The worm castings that I use will be different from the castings that are sold commercially. I like to keep my worm castings strong, so I harvest them anywhere from 3 to 6 months, consistently feeding the worms weekly with a high nutrient diet. For the mix, I keep a 5 to 5 to 1 to 1 ratio. I measure in gallons, but the ratio is 5 parts peat moss, 5 parts worm castings, 1 part vermiculite, and 1 part perlite. For this particular mix, I will be making 12 gallons of soil. Because this soil is for starting seeds, it is especially important to screen out any large debris that would otherwise obstruct the seeds from sprouting. I like to use a strainer, but a metal screen will also work. I start by screening 5 gallons of peat moss, gallon by gallon. I recommend doing this when the peat moss is dry so that it's easier to sift. All you have to do is press the peat moss through the screen. The result from this is a super fine fiber. After it is sifted, you can add water to saturate it. In this particular case, I am not going to do that as the worm castings I am using are already pretty saturated. The dry peat will soak up the excess water in the castings. Because the castings are so saturated, I am going to first mix the peat with the castings and then sift everything. Normally, I just sift the castings separately. As you can see, there is a huge difference between the mix and the original castings. Then I sift 1 gallon of perlite and 1 gallon of vermiculite. Both of them are fairly brittle, so any big pieces can be crushed through the screen. After adding them, the soil mix is complete. This is the soil before and now when it is complete. I then take the mix and divide it into planting cups. I actually found some commercial potting mix and wanted to show the difference between the two soils. As you can see, the store-bought soil is pretty much all peat moss. Here is the timeline for my seeds last spring. After only 4 days, the seeds began germinating and sprouting. On day 9, I had about an 85 to 90% germination rate. On day 42, the seedlings were very strong, green, and healthy. Feel free to make your own variations. Thanks for watching, and I hope you learned something.